Hello and welcome to Rock Your Block. I'm Tia Young, your host, and we have a very special show for you today. I'd like to start out with a question. Where were you on September 11th, 2001? I can remember exactly what I was doing. I had taken my mom to the optometrist's office and was sitting out in the waiting room waiting for her. And all of a sudden I heard this fantastic boom. I didn't know what was happening. And a few minutes later, the building began to shake. And I really thought that we were having an earthquake. But things settled down for a couple of seconds. And then within minutes, I heard sirens coming from everywhere and airplanes. And we really didn't know what to think. I was looking at the doctor's receptionist and she was looking at me. But about 40 minutes later, we were on our way home and I turned the radio on and the news that I heard was just devastating. I felt for a few minutes that I had just been suspended somehow out of my body and that I was just in a state of nothingness, just wondering, what in the world is going on. Our special guest today is Sharyn Alvarez, and Sharyn lost her baby sister. She didn't lose her that day, but some of the debris and dust and things that were coming from the demise of the Twin Towers actually took Felicia's life about 5 months later. So today we're going to talk about Felicia's story, and we're also going to talk about just the grieving process that people go through. So if you would join me in welcoming Ms. Sharyn Alvarez. Sharyn, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, and you?
That's so good. I thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that this is a bittersweet subject, bitter in that we all just hate what happened to America on that day. And I guess the sweetness would be that we do have to carry on. We do have to move forward. And, life goes on.
It does.
It does. And the first thing I know that you work in Virginia, and you work on the 10th floor of one of the new buildings in Rosslyn, Virginia? Is that
yes,
right?
I work in Rosslyn, Virginia.
You work in Rosslyn. What do you think about some days when you're looking out of your 10th floor?
It's interesting because I don't look at a tall building anymore without seeing a plane go through it.
Wow.
And I know after this much time, maybe I shouldn't think that way, but it's just a quick flash that comes to me. One day I was sitting at a cubicle, that had a window, because my cubicle doesn't have a window, but the person that has the cubicle with the window retired, so, I figured that'd be my little lunch spot.
Right.
And I was sitting there, just looking out the window, and these buildings have the mirrored glass or the type of glass that you can see out but no one can see in.
Right.
It's dark on the outside. And just for a moment, I just had this feeling of, I wonder what the people were thinking about on that day in New York or in the Pentagon. What were they thinking? I'm eating lunch, and by lunchtime, the Twin Towers had fallen. I just thought, were they thinking about their bills or planning a conference or standing around chatting about a television show they had watched the night before or showing some family pictures of the latest grandchildren? And then I thought about as I looked around the cubicle, I started looking at the carpet and the ceiling tiles and the fluorescent lights. I guess I was having a morbid moment.
Right.
This was pretty recent that I had these thoughts, thinking about how all of that was just disintegrated and turned into that dust that my sister breathed in and eventually killed her.
Right. Well, I can understand your feeling to a point, and I say that because until you have walked a mile in somebody's shoes, you only know partially, how they feel. I can certainly understand the loss of a loved one because I lost my brother in January of this year to prostate cancer. But we had 6 years, and I can't say that it was a 100% total shock that he's not with us. But in your case, this was something totally, really, in my opinion, unnecessary. And it's just devastating. I mean, even now, to think about it, I know it will be 11 years, I think,
Yes.
in a couple of weeks from now, but it seems like it just happened a few minutes ago
Yeah.
to me,
I
so
can't
I can
believe
imagine.
I can't believe the
how it
time
is.
has gone by.
Sharyn, tell us a little bit about Felicia. Tell us a little bit about her story, you know, how she came up, the family, and what she was doing. I understand that she was a up-and-coming attorney with the Department of Education, which is, what, one block away
Well,
from
she was
the
a
Trade
civil
Center.
rights investigator. She wasn't.
Wow.
She was a lawyer. She was the youngest child in our family. By the time she was about 12 years old, she knew she wanted to be a lawyer.
Wow.
And that was interesting, you know, because that's just not something the rest of us had thought about. And my mother told me that she told her while she was washing dishes, you know, I'm going to be a lawyer when I grow up. What happened with my sister was she was in middle school during the time of the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And she had several teachers who were deferred from the draft, so they didn't have to fight in the war. And she had 2 teachers that were law students. And they dropped out of law school, became school teachers in the inner city, and in order to wait out the Vietnam War.
Right, this is in New York City.
Right, in New York City. So what happened was, in the course of teaching them English and social studies, they talked about themselves and their law school, and that's how she first came up with the idea that she could do this.
And this was grade school?
Middle school.
Middle school, okay.
She was inspired by them. So she decided this was something she could do.
Wow.
So my mother said, hey, go for it. You know, we were always very education conscious. So as she grew up, she continued to have that thought that that's what she wanted to be when she grew up. She finished high school, she went to college, she took the LSAT exam. She didn't like the score that she got, so she took it again.
Good for her.
And she applied for Brooklyn Law School and attended Brooklyn Law School.
Wow. And then she has children?
She did. She eventually got married. She has 2 children. She has a son, Joseph, and he's 24 now. And then she has a daughter, Rebecca. She's 20 now.
Wow. I understand Rebecca's in college. Is she
yes,
junior, senior?
She's a junior. She's a junior at Stony Brook University, and she's studying psychology.
She's doing well.
She is.
She's
she
doing
is.
Really well. That's good. That's good to hear. Sharyn, tell us what happened on that day to Felicia.
On that particular day, she was working in one of the buildings about a block away from the World Trade Center. You know, a lot of times they have this, what they call, I'm trying to think of the word that we use it a lot now in federal government, sort of a stay in place.
Okay.
Shelter in place is the term that they use. So when this disaster happened, they were trying to evacuate everyone out of the World Trade Center.
Okay.
So all the people in surrounding buildings were told through an intercom system to wait where they were. So the streets would be clear for vehicles and for the people to come out of the World Trade Center. So she stayed where she was. I found out later on during the deposition, when I read the deposition that one of her coworkers had given to the 9/11 Compensation Board, that they actually witnessed people jumping out of the buildings of the World Trade Center. And she never mentioned that to us. I guess that was just too horrible for her to talk about.
Yeah.
But eventually, they left the buildings themselves, and probably when the buildings collapsed, and she was engulfed in the dust. She was in, there's a zone,
right?
yeah, there's a zone, yeah, there's a zone, they call it a zone where anybody that was in that zone for where the dust passed, you know, had that opportunity to breathe it in.
Now she lived in Staten Island. So that means she had to take a ferry. So is she walking from her job to?
No, the ferry was shut down. The ferry was immediately shut down when the first planes hit. And she had to walk from Manhattan to Brooklyn, over the bridges into Brooklyn. She walked to her sister-in-law's house where her brother's sister, her husband's sister, lived in Brooklyn. Her brother-in-law drove her to the Verrazano Bridge, and then she walked over the bridge because the bridges were shut down.
Right.
So no one could drive across the bridge. She had to walk across the bridge.
So she's
when she walked across the bridge, the Verrazano Bridge, then my brother-in-law picked her up and took her home.
Right.
It took hours.
Oh, I bet it did.
It took, one thing she did have, she said she had, a lot of New York women, they keep sneakers in their drawer, and they, they put their sneakers on, and then they leave their high heels in the
drawer.
at the office. So she put on her, her
sneakers,
and she had to walk home.
She had to walk home. And then, of course, like you said, all the debris and dust.
She got caught in that dust.
Everybody's
seen it on television to see what it looked like when the buildings fell.
Right. That was just a traumatic. Well, I know that you have this beautiful quilt that you made for us. Can you tell us about this quilt?
This is I designed it as a picnic blanket because I thought, in the future, Rebecca and Joseph, I'd take them out on picnics, and then eventually when Rebecca is older, she can have it to take her children out on picnics.
Right.
But during the grief process, I read a lot of books, did a lot of online research because this was something new to me.
Right.
And one book that I read talked about a grandmother who sat with her grandchild. He had lost his father, and they took his father's shirts and they made a quilt out of the shirts. So I thought about that, and I was able to get some of her clothes, that were still in her house, and I cut them up in pieces and made what I call a crazy quilt.
This is absolutely
so that
gorgeous.
we could have a picnic blanket and they would have something of their mother.
How long did it take you to make
It took me
this?
5 years to make it.
5 years?
I didn't.
Just
it was
because the grief.
Yeah, it was hard to work on, but when we got to the point where it was about 4 years, and I'd been working on it a little bit at a time, I made a conscientious effort to finish it. And we debuted it. We took it to Central Park on Mother's Day, 2007. My mother, Rebecca, and I came up to New York. I rented it, had a car service pick us up, packed it, went to the local deli and got our favorite lunch.
Right.
And the driver, because I didn't want to try to drive in Manhattan, I figured treat myself as well as my mother, and he drove us to Central Park. We spread out the blanket. I took pictures, and we had a picnic.
That's such a beautiful sentiment.
It was a nice day. We had a really, really nice day, and I was glad because that was the last Mother's Day that my mother was with us.
Wow. Well, we're going to come back. We're going to take a short break. You're watching Rock Your Block. We have Ms. Sharyn Alvarez as our guest today on our special 9/11 segment. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain-link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
Before terrorists steal them.
Why did we learn all this?
My mother,
My son
My sister-in-law.
were all murdered September 11th.
help protect America.
Together we can.
Please join us.
Hi, thank you. You're watching Rock Your Block. We have Ms. Sharyn Alvarez with us. This is our 9/11 special. And before the station break, Sharyn was telling us about this beautiful quilt that has been done. It's a memory quilt for her sister Felicia. And Sharyn ended up saying that the picnic that they had was actually the last one for their mom, who passed very shortly after that. So Sharyn, tell us a little bit about your mom.
My mother, she was the person that kept it all together in our family.
Miss Carmen.
Yes. My mother and father separated and were divorced by the time I was 7 years old. So she raised us, and I'm the oldest of 5 children. We have 3 brothers and my sister Felicia. So she was devastated. She really was devastated. She was 77 years old when Felicia died, and she just couldn't understand why this happened and why not her instead of her baby.
Yeah, I know that it's so sad. I can feel your pain on that because my mother also felt the same way with my brother. My brother was a lot older than Felicia. He was 63 when he passed earlier this year, and my mom will be 89 next month, and she often thinks of that. Why not her? You never expect to bury a child.
Yeah.
I know that has to be traumatic. I don't have any children. I have everybody else's child to take care of. I don't have any of my own, but I can imagine the devastation there. So do you think that she died of a broken heart, basically?
You know, it took 6 years, but yes, I do. She was very, my mother went straight into anger. You know, you have the stages of grief, and
Yeah.
I think after the initial shock, she just became so angry about what happened, and she really had a hard time.
With that,
It was difficult for her.
But she's at peace now.
I think so.
I do too, I think so. Sharyn, you brought some pictures, and I know that as we close out the show today, we have a montage of pictures that we'll be showing you, but show us some of the pictures that you have.
Well, this one is the quilt at Central Park that I was telling you about.
That's what we have here.
Yeah, we laid it out, and then we actually sat on it and had a picnic with it. And we've used it a couple of times. Rebecca and I have used it. I'm holding on to the quilt.
Right.
I figure
It's a family heirloom.
she's 20 years old now, so I'm thinking when she's around 40, she can have it.
Right.
Well, when I feel like she's a little more settled and during a move won't get lost in the move.
Right.
Maybe I'll give it to her when she's 30. I won't
Right.
make her wait that long.
Well, it's a very beautiful piece of work. You should be very proud of it.
Yeah.
And then the next photo?
This was when she graduated from law school. There's a picture of my mother. And this is Lincoln Center
Yes.
in the background, the fountain there. So we were all happy. My children came.
Oh,
in
wow.
fact, Joseph was there. He was about 18 months old at the time.
Wow.
So he was at the graduation too.
So she was a young mom studying, going through law school and working.
Well, yeah, she got married with 24, so she was probably 30
Right.
when she graduated from law school.
But that's tough to be in law school and raising little ones and
Yes.
Working.
My mom
full-time
helped
job.
out. Yeah, my mother helped out. Everybody helped out. We
That's
were really
good.
proud of her.
Oh, that's
We
good.
really were.
It's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, that's nice, Mom.
And then
Well, this one was taken in Thanksgiving. There's Joseph and Rebecca.
look
And that's
Rebecca.
at my house. So I snapped. I like to take pictures, and I'm glad I did because in spite of all the pictures I've taken, I just don't feel I have as many as I would have liked to have
Right.
of her. But this was one Thanksgiving.
Hindsight.
And Felicia never took a bad picture.
Right. No.
Camera loved her.
I loved her, yeah.
She never took a bad picture. You bring out a camera and she just smiled.
ready.
And it's really natural.
Yeah.
She really,
Unlike me,
she was
I'm-
never bashful or intimidated by cameras.
Right.
So she
That
always
is a
took
that
great.
is a very
Yeah, it's
beautiful
just
picture.
a snapshot.
Yeah.
Everybody were playing games
Yeah,
while we were
that's
cooking
nice.
dinner.
And then the last one that you brought for us?
This one was my favorite. This was taken in 2000. It was about 2 years before she died.
And now, is that in New York? Or?
No, we're in Pensacola, Florida.
Ah,
And
okay.
we were visiting the beach
Mhm.
and at one of the graduations for one of my nieces
Okay.
who lives in Florida. So we all went down. We took
How
a
old were the
family trip.
kids, in that photo?
Rebecca's 8 and Joseph is 12.
Wow.
Mhm.
Little did they know in just a few, 3
Nope.
years later, she would not be with them.
Yes.
Wow.
So.
Sharyn, let's talk a little bit. Those are absolutely lovely, and I know that they'll be treasures, that you'll have and keep. You touched on something a little earlier that I think is so important, and that is the grieving process. It's something that we don't really like to talk about, we don't like to deal with. I know that even with my brother passing, some people just didn't know what to say. Some people just avoided us, because they just didn't know what to say. What has been your experience with the grieving, going through the grieving process?
I think it's death that people have a problem with.
Mm-hmm. And
We live in a world that celebrates youth. We live in a world that expects good things to happen to us. So anytime something bad happens, people have a problem with it, and death is one of those things. Loss is what the grieving process is about, dealing with loss,
Sure.
and that can come in many forms. Right now we're experiencing Hurricane Isaac, or people in Louisiana and Mississippi are, and there'll be a lot of loss there.
Right.
And
that's
people
true.
will have to deal, with the grieving process. In this particular case, because her death was associated with a a major situation, because
A
9/11 is going to be one of those situations that people remember.
It's almost like an act of war.
Right.
I mean, that's how I looked at
they
it.
remember one of those occasions in world history. Everybody remembers it. Later on, when she first died, we didn't know what happened. We didn't know why she died.
Oh,
And we were told it was an apparent heart attack.
So you thought that she was having symptoms like a cold, a
She
bad
was
cold?
having some symptoms, but I didn't know that they were anything serious, and
Right.
I don't think she did either. And it was a slow deterioration that she was feeling. She might have felt it, but sometimes it's hard to tell, you know, what people are thinking about when they're not feeling well. But she, you know, it was a sudden cardiac incident. We had to wait 3 months for an autopsy report to tell us what happened. And that was like my
That's hard.
focus.
Yeah.
What happened?
Right.
That's all I needed to know. I just needed to know what happened. I couldn't seem to make sense of it until I knew exactly what happened. And it took 3 months for us to get, because they still had a backlog of autopsies from people who had died during 9/11.
And that was five months later.
5 months, yeah, 5 months
later.
almost to the day.
Yeah.
So for me, the one thing that I'd like to tell people is that the grieving process is as individual as we are. It really is. How you handle grief, how you feel about loss is as individual as each and every one of us are.
Yeah.
There's no one way to handle it, to manage it, or to feel.
It's different for
It's
each,
different for
it's
each
for every
person.
person. Well, Sharyn, I was so grateful to you for researching and giving me this article on, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, so doctors, you know, forgive me, but it looks like it's sarcoidosis.
Sarcoidosis.
Sarcoidosis, and that is what they ultimately, the diagnosis that they gave. But you said something interesting to me, is that it really wasn't that, but because the doctors had never had anything.
For lack of a better word, it's the symptoms that that manifest itself similar to, in her case, it was sarcoidosis with cardiac involvement. But in reality, her death certificate says homicide.
It does say homicide? Wow.
Because everyone that was killed on 9/11,
the
manner of death is homicide.
Well, can you tell us what little you know about sarcoidosis? I didn't get a chance to read all of the pages. I kind of scanned through it, but I did see that it looks like something that's like a parasite, like it catches hold to one part of your body and it just ends up going all over. And like once you get it, you can't get rid of it. They don't have an antidote or whatever for it. It's just
Yes, sarcoidosis it's a rare condition that people get. There's not a lot of understanding as to what causes it, but people feel it's environmentally, you know, an environmental situation that causes it. In this particular case, a lot of the firefighters and first responders had developed this cough, and it came from the dust. When they did the autopsy, they found that granulomas, which were tiny grain-like abnormal cells, had grown in all of the organs of her body. They existed in every organ. Sarcoidosis particularly manifests itself in the lungs. But in rare cases, which is already a rare condition, and even rarer cases, it can impact the heart. It impacted my sister's heart and it caused it to stop beating. But when the autopsy report was done, she had the granulomas in every organ in her body.
Wow.
So when she breathed in this dust, obviously it started a reaction that developed throughout her whole body. And there has been studies showing, because there is a World Trade Center health study that's been going on of people who are, you know, bringing in symptoms. And I actually contacted them when she died to find out if they were monitoring people who have died, and they were just monitoring people who were sick.
Okay.
And at that time, they expressed their sympathies, but they weren't monitoring people that had died, because the threshold
was
the threshold was for first 30 days.
Okay.
after 9/11, you would be considered a victim. But because she died 5 months later, she was not considered a victim. She was considered a victim in Staten Island because in Staten Island, anybody that died remotely related to 9/11 was considered a victim.
A victim.
But when the research was done and the doctors did further study, they felt that her death was caused by the dust. She was officially named in May of 2007 as the first victim to be officially recognized as a 9/11 victim after the fact.
Right. And I know that you worked hard with the lawyers and with all of the advocates to make sure that your sister, everything turned out right for her and for her family.
Because we felt that there were other victims like her too.
Right.
And once she was recognized, the hope was that others would be recognized as well.
Well, Sharyn, I have so many more questions to ask you, and I definitely don't think that we have really gone into the grief factor as much as I would like to. Would you be willing to come back and do a sequel at some time, another segment, so that we can really examine a little bit more about sarcoidosis? I promise that I will do my research and know a little bit more about it. And I know there's so much more that we can talk about. We just can't get it into the 30-minute session.
Sure, I'll be happy to come back.
And so I would love that. Do you have like any 1-second parting words that you would like to give? And then we're going to say bye, and we're going to close with Felicia's story in photos.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And 9/11 affected everyone in some way, whether you lost a family member or not. So it's going to be 11 years. We move on with our life, we get better, but we always remember.
Sharyn, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was not an easy thing for you to do, and so I really thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.